Telek, this is Tibet This Week, a weekly news edition on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan Administration. Let us look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama offers support to rescue and relief efforts in Turkey and Syria. UN experts' press release highlights alarming forced assimilation and separation of 1 million Tibetan children in Tibet by China. Central Tibetan Administration welcomes reintroduction of the Tibet Bill Promoting a resolution to Tibet-China conflict in both houses of the US Congress. Sikyong continues engagements in North America. Two-day National Executive Meeting of Bharat Tibbat Sahyog Manch held in Ghaziabad. Office of Tibet Taiwan participates in 31st Taipei International Book Exhibition. Member of National Commission for Minorities, Srimati Rinchen Lhamo visits Central Tibetan Administration. Saddened by reports he has seen of the devastating earthquakes that have struck Turkey and Syria, leading to extensive loss of life and many injuries, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has written to the Executive Director of the World Food Programme. His Holiness offered his condolences to those families who have lost loved ones and pray for all those affected by this tragedy, and said it is heartening to know that in addition to the UN-coordinated health teams, NGOs and many countries from around the world are sending support to help the rescue and relief efforts in the earthquake zone. His Holiness, as a token of his solidarity with the people of Turkey and Syria affected by this tragedy, has made donation towards the rescue and relief efforts under his office. On Monday this week, a group of 3 UN independent experts strongly condemned China for forcibly separating over 1 million Tibetan children from families and assimilating Tibetan culture at colonial-style boarding schools in a strongly worded press release. The experts highlighted the scale of residential schools in Tibet is much higher compared to other parts of areas under China, and this has been increasing in recent years. The forced closure of rural schools in Tibetan populated areas and replacement by township or county-level schools which exclusively use Chinese in teaching and communications has further added to the scale of residential schools in Tibet. The UN experts said they are in contact with the Chinese authorities regarding the aforementioned issues, also raised in its communication to China in November 2022. Representative Tile Chogi noted that this is one of the first press released by the UN experts on Tibet, detailing the egregious human rights violations in Tibet, and we hope many will follow, especially given the dire situation in Tibet, which remains the least free regions in the world. The 3 UN Special Rapporteur are Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Mr. Fernand D. Varenes, Special Rapporteur on Right to Education, Ms. Farida Shahid, Special Rapporteur in the field of cultural rights, Ms. Alexandra Zadanki, jointly voiced concern over Chinese policies. The bill proposes that the United States make it a policy to protect the Tibetan people's right to self-determination under international law, and that their ability to exercise this right is precluded by the current People's Republic of China's policies, and that the conflict between Tibet and People's Republic of China is unresolved, and that the legal status of Tibet remains to be determined in accordance with international law. The legislation makes it clear that the only path ahead is to embrace His Holiness' middle way approach, which is based on negotiation in good faith and without preconditions, to establish genuine autonomy for Tibetan people within the framework of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. Kalu Nonzidoma of the Department of Information and International Relations appreciated the efforts of Congressman Jim McGovern, Congressman Michael McCall, Senator Jeff Merkley, and Senator Todd Young, and said the reintroduction of the bipartisan bill in both the houses of the U.S. Congress is yet another demonstration of the U.S. lawmakers' commitment to giving a much-needed impetus to the resolution of the long-standing unresolved Sino-Tibet conflict through middle way approach. Such strong demonstration of solidarity by the U.S. reaffirms the Tibetan people's faith and trust in the just leadership of the U.S. and their steadfast commitment to protecting and advancing cherished American values by defending those striving for peace, democracy, freedom, and human rights everywhere. The proposal of this bill has undeniably deepened the optimism of Tibetans inside Tibet who, as we speak, are continually subjected to severe repression, Kalin Nonzuruma said. Sikyong Pempasring of Central Tibetan Administration arrived in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday last week following his successful engagements in London. Sikyong was received at the airport by Representative Dr. Namgyal Chudup of the Office of Tibet, Interim President Pujung Tsering from the International Campaign for Tibet, and board members of the Capital Area Tibetan Association. Sikyong paid a courtesy visit to U.S. Special Coordinator for Tibet, Under-Secretary Azhar Zia, and Senior Director for Democracy and Human Rights at the National Security Council, Rob Bershinsky, accompanied by Interim Secretary Tenzin Legdup of the Finance Department and Representative Namgyal Chudup. Prior to that, Sikyong met with the representative and staff of the Office of Tibet in D.C. and the Interim President and Vice President of the International Campaign for Tibet to discuss the Tibetan advocacy campaign. Following his engagements in Washington, Sikyong Pempasring arrived in Wisconsin on Friday last week. Sikyong met and interacted with the Tibetan community there about the key commitments of the 16 Kashag and meanwhile answered queries and clarified doubts of the general public. Sikyong updated the public about the advocacy and welfare initiative implemented by his administration, such as setting up a permanent strategy committee in the replacement of the task force on Sino-Tibetan negotiations established in 1998. Liaison Officer Kunkatashi informed the gathering of the purpose of Sikyong's visit this time. Sikyong's arrival in Chicago Airport was received by heads and representatives of Chicago and Wisconsin Tibetan associations, including representatives from Hrida Gaziling Monastery. On Saturday last week, Sikyong Pempasring held an interactive session with Wisconsin-based Tibetan students and professionals during his visit program to North America. In the afternoon, Sikyong was received by the Chicago Tibetan Association's deputy and committee members for his interaction with the Tibetan community, where he spoke about the middle way approach, how Tibet was an independent nation according to the history, and U.S. efforts to pass a bill in the House regarding the same. The need to negotiate with the Chinese government to resolve Tibet issue through strengthened advocacy efforts in the global arena. Coinciding with the public event, the Department of Education of Central Tibetan Administration took the opportunity to have Sikyong present the Excellence Certificate to the toppers of the Chicago Tibetan Weekend School, including felicitation of the long-serving teacher of the Weekend School, Lobsang Yarpel. On Sunday last week, Sikyong interacted with the Chicago-based Tibetan youths and answered their queries concerning the U.S.-Tibet relationship, the present status of Tibet under People's Republic of China rule, and the need to dispel the false narrative of Tibet's history propagated by China. Following the talk, Sikyong conducted an assessment tour of the weekend school. As part of his engagements in North America, Sikyong Pempasring of the Central Tibetan Administration met and interacted with several prominent supporters and friends of Tibet in Washington, D.C. On Tuesday this week, Sikyong called on Congressman Diaz Balart, a senior member of the House Committee on Appropriations, followed by a meeting with Congresswoman Young Kim and Senator Brent Schatz. Following that, Sikyong paid a visit to the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael T. McCall, and Senator Todd Young, who are the congressmen, to reintroduce the Promoting a Resolution to the Tibet-China Conflict Act in the House of Representatives. Sikyong implored for persistent support from the senators and congressmen and congresswomen in enacting the bill that might encourage and serve as an exemplar to others like European Union in promoting a similar bill in their respective legislatures, while calling for continuous political and financial support towards Tibet cause during the meetings. Along with Richard Gere, chair of International Campaign for Tibet, who attended the meeting with Sikyong virtually, Representative Dr. Namgyal Chudup and ICT Interim President and Vice President also attended the meeting with Sikyong. Sikyong also met and interacted with the Director and staff of the Department of State's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor Affairs and President Derek Mitchell and the staff of the National Democratic Institute to apprise them of Central Tibetan Administration's undertakings and future projects. The two-day National Executive Meeting of Bharat Tibbat Sahyog Manch was held at Kailash Mansarovar Bhavan, Indrapuram, Ghaziabad on 4th and 5th February. The meeting was presided over under the presence of Dr. Indresh Kumar, a senior campaigner of the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh and guide of the Manch. Dr. Indresh announced that from 5th May 2023, 25 years of the establishment of Bharat Tibet Sahyog Manch are about to be completed, and from this day, the Silver Jubilee year of the forum will begin. The celebration will start from Dharamshala throughout the year all over the country with many types of programs until next year. During the inaugural session, Acharya Yishi Pinzo, former Deputy Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in exile, and National Sant Mahamandaleshwar Swami Dr. Abhijit Anandji Maharaj also expressed their views. ITCO coordinator highlighted the petition campaign started by the VTAG, Department of Information and International Relations of CTA, which concerns shutting down the colonial boarding schools being implemented by the Chinese government in Tibet, and urged all the participants to sign the petition and share the same with other members. At the concluding session of the two-day National Executive Meeting, Kaluang Gyari Doma of Department of Security of Central Tibetan Administration and Srimati Rinchen Lhamo, member of the National Commission for Minorities, Government of India, joined Dr. Indresh Kumar and other executive members of Bharat Tibet Sahyog Manch. Kaluang Gyari Doma and Srimati Rinchen Lhamo addressed the gathering and appreciated the work of Bharat Tibet Sahyog Manch, its executive members and all its members for their untiring support and work for Tibet. The chief guests and the members took an awareness yatra out in Indrapuram, Ghaziabad to make the local public aware of Tibet. The two-day National Executive Meeting had the presence of core members, India-Tibet Coordination Office Coordinator in charge, Tashidiki, and staff, representatives of the Tibetan associations and 350 delegates from all over the country. Last week, Office of Tibet Taiwan took part in the 31st Taipei International Book Exhibition at the Taipei World Trade Center Hall by displaying publications of its affiliate Gangchong Publication Books. On the book fair's final day, Representative Kelsang Gelzimbawa and Tashi Tsiring, of the President of the Tibetan Association in Taiwan, spoke on current political status of Tibet to the curious spectators. The six-day Taipei International Book Exhibition was participated by 470 publishers from 33 countries, and around 700 writers and intellects gave talks during the book fair. On Thursday this week, Srimati Rinchen Lhamo, a member of the National Commission for Minorities, Government of India, paid a visit to Central Tibetan Administration and monasteries adjacent to the premise of Kangchen Kishong. Following her visit to Nechung and Gadong monasteries, Srimati Rinchen Lhamo, along with the aide, made a visit to Tibetan Parliament in exile, where Deputy Speaker Domatsring Tekang received her. Following that, officiating Sikyong Kale Nonzudoma hosted the visiting delegation at the Kashak Secretariat to discuss issues concerning the welfare of Tibetan community in India, among others. The meeting was also attended by Deputy Speaker Domatsring Tekang, Tibetan Parliamentarian Tsiring Yangchen, Cabinet Secretary Tsegil Chuga Tangi, and the entourage of Srimati Rinchen Lhamo. That is all for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.